Paul Zak, is going to take you through the neuroscience of things. He's an economist and a neuroscientist and a tech geek, which makes him the ultimate geek. You put them together and you've got a recipe for some really interesting stuff. He has spent his career studying the brain and what in particular keeps it and you engaged and happy. His company, Immersion Neuroscience, measures the unconscious reaction to things that experience a piece of content as it's happening. And he does it all using a smartwatch, which is like magic to me. So I want to bring Paul on stage and I want to have him share a little bit about the magic he's working in driving engagement.
Hey, Robin, nice to see you. Thanks to everybody for joining. Virtual events are tough. Let's be clear on that, all right? So I think we're acclimating to this kind of new system. We're in a 2D world. I thought the hugs was an interesting poll, Robin, because that's what we normally do when we go to live conferences, right? Is we hug people, we talk, we chit chat, we have these bump-ins. But if I want to bump into Francis in the corner, hey, Francis, it's kind of hard, right, on Zoom or on video conferencing of any type, right? So it's not as natural. So we don't get as much kind of hits in our brain. So we've been doing for the last almost 20 years now is measuring the signals that come from the brain that tell us you're having an extraordinary experience. So we can then ask, well, what are extraordinary experiences and how do we know when they're happening? So for most conferences that we attend, we want to get something out of it, right? We're trying to learn something. We're trying to network. We're trying to sell something. We want to see an action after that conference. So we want to demonstrate the return on the investment of going to that conference. And that's actually how we started measuring immersion, which is we gave people an experience and we looked at brain activity for people who had a observable response to that experience and those who didn't. So donate to charity after watching a video about kids with cancer, buy a product after seeing a commercial, post on social media, email your congressperson. So we did this over and over and over, and we measured hundreds of signals in the brain at very high frequency simultaneously, and then began to winnow those down until we identified the signals that told us that this experience was sufficiently valuable or powerful so that it motivated you to take an action, right? So I think that's the goal, whether we're live events or in-person events, or virtual events. We actually want to have people do something, not just be entertained, and entertainment's awesome, that's great, but conferences usually have a bit of a higher purpose than that. And so what do we find? To have this amazing experience, you need two core things. One is you've got to pay attention. That's a given, but attention just opens the door. The second is you actually have to care about the content that you're absorbing. So we call that emotional resonance. You have to actually share the enthusiasm, the energy of that speaker or that presentation. When you do, the brain saves that information in a very particular way, so that's literally top of mind. It's more easily recalled. And so if one of the metrics we want to look at in terms of outcomes for conferences is information recall, we find a strong correlation between this neurologic state I've called immersion and information recall weeks later. So the more immersive I can make this meeting, this conference, this event, the more, at least on one metric, the more valuable that is to the folks who have sent or chosen to go to that conference. So we take a very kind of functional approach. As Robin said, one of the nice things about this is that although we started out by doing blood draws and using very, very expensive machines and 19 PhDs to run them, in the last 4 years, we're now able to pull data from a smartwatch and actually measure the value of that experience second by second. So for our clients who subscribe to our software in the events industry, they can ask a lot of really interesting questions. The first is, if I have video or audio of that conference, the platform, the Immersion platform, will overlay that with the data. And then I'm going to ask, hey, what worked and what didn't? In fact, the platform will automatically show you high points and low points neurologically. Second, I can actually watch that data in real time. So if I'm able to pivot in real time, I can go, look, these guys are checked out. This is not working. Let's make a change. I'll give you an example of that in a second. The third is you can provide customized feedback to individuals who want to download the app and actually have their brains measured during the conference. So to increase the impact of that conference, to leverage what you've experienced, you can give them feedback, and that feedback can be customized at scale by saying, hey, you know what? You loved session 3 the most, which was on, I don't know, something, GPR in Europe. And you go, okay, wow, that was awesome. Now, again, you as a subscriber don't know if it's because my friend Kate was a presenter and she's awesome, or because the material was awesome. All I know is that your brain really sucked this information in, right? So that's pretty darn good to know. And then the second, particularly when we're thinking about training or education, I can look at people who are below our threshold. So we've got about 50,000 humans for which we've collected immersion data. And we actually know for the type of experience what the thresholds are for good or bad. And so if you're below that threshold and you're doing a safety training for jet engine mechanics, I want to be sure that you really understood that information, right? So if you're below that threshold, I can immediately give you feedback when that session ends and say, hey, you know what? I'll pick on someone whose name I can see. You know what, Sherry, you are below threshold, and we're going to give you a link to review some additional material so that when you go to take that exam next week, we make sure you can pass the exam. You've really understood the material. So in terms of conference organization, this is really almost perfect for virtual events, because virtual events, even as a speaker, right, I kind of look at your faces. I sort of know that you're maybe looking at me, but I can't see, as Robin said, I can't see if you're fidgety. I can't see if you're, having a drink of water. I'm not getting all that kind of visceral feedback that we get when we're in person, nor do the attendees have that sort of shoulder to shoulder. I got to kind of pay attention and look at this stuff because I'm packed in this conference room and there's not a lot other for me to do. I could look at my phone, but that's pretty darn rude. Gosh, I hate that when people do that when I'm speaking. It's the worst, right? So, I think what we've seen is that once COVID kind of shut all the economies down, within a couple of months, people started saying, oh gosh, my virtual team meetings, I don't really know how to run that effectively. I better start measuring the content I'm creating. If I'm creating marketing materials, I used to ask my buddies in the office what they thought, which is kind of not a good idea anyway. But now I don't have those people around me, or I can't really share that. So I could send this out and actually get people's neurologic data. So it allows us this level of precision to really capture what people's brains love and make sure we are giving that to them. But then lastly, we have some folks in the event industry who use our software who can then audit past events. So if that event is recorded, I can go to my client and go, hey, Procter & Gamble, we arranged your event last year, and we took 30 people from the general population, had them watch a video of that event, and we evaluated what worked and what didn't. Or during the event last year, we had a bunch of people in the audience, so we collected neurologic data from using the immersion platform, and we audited your previous event. And we're going to tell you exactly what worked and what didn't work. And this year, we're going to make some changes to accentuate the stuff that works and then reduce the stuff that doesn't work. So I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to show you some data. I'm collecting data myself right now. So I think the most important word in science is the word bullshit. So you guys can call bullshit on me, but I'm going to show you real data. So Accenture is a very long-term client. They use our technology to optimize the training for their employees. So those are events. They used to be in person. Now they're virtual, of course. They'd be coming back to virtual. And what they found is that people, no matter how good, for audiences, no matter how good that speaker is, cannot stay immersed for more than 20 minutes. So they've really broken down their training into 20-minute blocks. So I call this the 20-20-20 rule. No more than 20 minutes of presentation, and then 20 minutes of participatory use of that information. So table work, let's do work on this thing, and then 20 minutes of debrief. And they've also found that, again, it's metabolically costly to be immersed. So they're putting in longer breaks, right? We kind of think, hey, we're adults. I can sit in this chair for 8 hours. I know how to do that, right? I work all the time. Those breaks are important to get that breather. So virtually, that would be maybe breakout rooms where we can hang out, chat with each other. I'm pulling names from the screen there. Hey, Seth, it's been a long time. How are you? Gosh, what have you been doing the last year, right? So we can have that normal chit chat we would do in live events. And again, if it's live, we're going to do that normally. So I do think this technology is vitally important in the virtual events world, because we just cannot guarantee that the natural thing that humans do, which is chat, connect, hug, all those kinds of things when we build connections, and then also use that information to use that connection to reinforce the information that we heard on stage. We just can't ensure that's really happening. So if I can do a screen share, which looks like I can, I'm gonna show you some data and then we'll just have a chat and take some questions.
Paul, I've asked you this question before you show the data, thing on my right or anything else that's a distraction.
It's a good question. I have a cute dog next to me, so maybe I'm focused on the dog. So, right, we don't know that, but I think that's with a large sample size. So this data becomes statistically reliable with 35 people. So you don't need a lot of people to actually get a statistically reliable view of that. So yeah, you may be looking at the cute guy or girl next to you, or you may really like parts of that talk. But what we really want to know is, what is actually happening right now. Then we can just kind of slow it down, take some breaths, take a break, do whatever those things are. So you're seeing my data evolving here. So gray means I'm right on benchmark, and you can see these spikes. So I started talking here. I made a live note. So I'm pretty excited. Oh, now I turned red. So what's wrong with me? I'm not excited enough to talk to you. I started this a bit before we got on, just to make sure the data's coming in.
Are you measuring arousal, or what are you measuring in the smartwatch? What are we actually looking at? Is it the EEG? Is it heart rate? What is it?
Good thing. So great question, Rob. So we had a lot of funding from DARPA, from the U.S. intelligence community, a bunch of three-letter agencies. So we measured hundreds of signals in the brain simultaneously. And what we discovered is that when we go to the level of the brain itself, we're getting disaggregated signals. We're not getting networks. So we're actually pulling data from the cranial nerves. So we basically are taking a heart rate monitor. We don't care about heart rate. We wrote algorithms to infer this activity because we've measured everything simultaneously. So the two core components of immersion are attention and emotional resonance. So attention is associated with dopamine binding in the prefrontal cortex, and its emotional resonance is driven by the brain's production of oxytocin, which will actually bind to the cranial nerves and very subtly changes the rhythms of the heart.
So you correlated basically it's the arousal with the EEG effects. You basically is a derivative measure.
Yes, we infer brain activity from the peripheral nerves, right? So again, the brain is controlling heart, so we can work that in reverse. Associated is too weak for me. We have actually, all this is published, by the way, not the algorithms, everything else is published. We've done drug studies where we can turn on these pathways, and we can not only change the way your brain works, but we actually can influence your behavior. So for example, when we infuse oxytocin into people, they care more about the content, they'll act more on the content, they remember it better. So that's the emotional component part of this. And one of our clients, with apologies, Robin, for using one bad word, but one of our clients called this the give a shit measure. And that's about right. I think it's incumbent on us as events organizers to make sure that people really do care about this.
I know you're trying, you're working really hard to get these things right. But you're right, Rob, it is an inference. First half of this, you had to learn about cryptocurrency. Now you got to learn about neuroscience. Just a bunch of dummies here talking.
But it's not like an events triggered element like an evoked potential. It's basically general arousal state.
No, I'm trying to clear it to you. It's dopamine and oxytocin. It's a network effect of the brain that tells us you give a shit about what's going on. Okay. It does correlate with activity on the EEG and fMRI with prefrontal and brainstem activity associated with the receptors for those. We've done 10,000 blood draws. We've published drug studies. It's all in literature. It's not biased, Robin, because it's objective, passive data we're getting every time. Now, are the algorithms right? 50,000 observations suggest they are. And again, we keyed this, Rob, to predicting what people do, not what they say or what they feel. So this is a prediction engine ultimately. Now, to get that prediction, I've got to capture these emotional states.
Right.
But ultimately, I want to know, because I'm a behavioral neuroscientist, will you donate to charity? Will you tell someone about this information? Will you remember it? Right, that's the stuff that we predict. So you may disagree with the way we predict it or how I'm presenting it, but to me, these are data streams that we've evolved so that they are optimized for predicting outcomes.
But before everybody glazes over here, the measurement you're doing though is based, like Robin pointed out, on an algorithm where you're basically determining what the weight factors are, as opposed to something like a neural net that's learning them and you don't even know where they are.
Both. So right now it's hard-coded algorithms, but we have enough data now. They're starting to evolve this using machine learning.
Okay.
So the algorithm, very good point, Rob. So the algorithms will evolve, and actually they'll specialize for movies, for TV, for events, for live events, virtual events. They'll all start to evolve.
Right,
Yeah,
education. I think Cindy Chin left us, but also, Cindy, are you here in the room? Cindy's got a program called Clipper, which you also want to look at, CLIPR, which they're using in the advertising world and other worlds to measure engagement of the audience in a video, and attributing emotion to it. And I take a look at it because it's a nut that everybody's trying to crack in different ways. But what I love about your work, Paul, is it's a smartwatch. He has a smartwatch, and you showed us your dashboard, but you have a free, like, just try it for free thing, which is just fascinating. Is that hard to pull up?
I will pull it up. Thanks, Robin. Yeah, so we really believe in making this available so anybody can measure what the brain loves in real time. And as Robin said, you get a free 2-week trial, cheap to onboard. So yeah, just onboard yourself and it's good to go. Let me see if I can pull that up for you. So the website is getimmersion.com. And if you go to pricing, you'll see start now for free. Here's the pricing, so fairly inexpensive. We've really tried to democratize neuroscience so that everyone can have the ability to measure what people's brains love in real time. I think it's a real opportunity. So anyway, free trial all around here. There you go, start a free trial.
Yes, for most watches, for Apple watches, because I had a Samsung and had a little trouble, and Google, right? Google Wear, is that correct?
Yeah, OS Google. I think 30 different wearables. Fossil, Samsung is a little bit cranky, and we're adding more, every month.
Yeah, no, it's we just got a nice note in the chat from Kate saying her team has used this, and I think, I find it so incredibly humbling. So this week, between working with Paul's Get Immersion and translating my own talks using AI translation and watching the mistakes, this is the most humbling thing. Like, technology is like, it's crushing. I thought I was a pretty good and engaging speaker, but I can be so much better. And I think all of you, as you plan events and as you look at events, having the data to give people what they want, just like Michael said, they want to. Kate just wrote, to be fair, it does help if the speakers have a dog in their lap. Okay, I gotta find one. So yeah. So I think are there any other questions? You can put them in the chat. You can just jump in now. If not, I'm going to sort of, Paul, last thoughts. So do you expect that next year at CES or whatever else event we're at, we're wearing watches and there's a dashboard measuring our engagers and then taking the hook and pulling them off the stage?
I think it will be interesting, right? I think at a minimum to be able to rehearse that keynote and actually see how it's working would be great. But yeah, I mean, we've all been in these keynotes where, the person just drones on and on. You're like, oh my God, get to the point. So here's some data. So we actually internally had a bunch of people in our company watch TED Talks, right? The highlight of speaking, I think. And we found that a 10% increase in immersion for a TED Talk would result in 176,000 more online views. So the size effects are big for actually making these improvements, really connecting to your audience. And that's what's, I think, super exciting for me. So why not use the technology?
Well, it's funny. I keep thinking maybe, the joke was that Vegas always pumped the air full of oxygen. I'm thinking we just pump the whole place full of oxytocin and let everybody be engaged in everything. But I can't thank you enough. Last thoughts, so I know you've done work with a number of companies that have found this incredibly useful.
We have, yeah, from giant tech companies that you would know to many of the movie studios or the TV networks. And so I think, if we're creating content, let's really create it. Let's make it great for the audience. We all want that.
Yeah. And if anybody out there is in education, whatever you said about entertainment and meetings goes triple for education. And because you're fighting a lot of other stimuli as an educator. So with that, Carrie, can you switch back to a PowerPoint? I'm going to bring a close for this meeting. Please visit our new group, the virtualentsgroup.org, but click on community. Next month, and it's summertime, but I hope you'll all turn out. We're going to have Yarkin, and you can all say his last name together. Yarkin's going to talk to us about what it means that Socio is now part of Cisco and what that means for Cisco and meetings and WebEx. And then you'll love Denzel Rankin and Marco Giberti. His name does not have an L in it. Marco, they both wrote Reinventing Live, the always on future of events. So they'll be with us. Enjoy summer. Sorry, I had so many networking issues in the beginning of all this. I'm going to go complain to my local rural internet provider. Thank you. See you next month. See you online. Stay virtual. Bye. Cancel the meeting. I had to switch seats. We're switching machines. There we go.